The air was thick with tension. Dust hung in the air, illuminated by a single flickering bulb. The bunker walls seemed to close in with each distant explosion. Muffled booms echoed through the night. The soldiers inside sat in uneasy silence, each man lost in his own thoughts, wondering if this night would be his last.
Fiddling with his helmet strap, his eyes darted from face to face, seeking reassurance. But there was none to be found. The fear was palpable. It clung to them like a heavy blanket, threatening to suffocate their resolve.
Yet beneath the fear, a spark of determination burned. Sergeant Miller paced the length of the bunker, his boots scuffed against the dirt floor. With each step, he seemed to be counting, measuring the small space. Perhaps he was trying to distract himself from the chaos outside. Or maybe he was formulating a plan. His men watched him, drawing strength from his steady presence.
The wounded soldier in the corner groaned softly. His bandages were stained dark.
Offering water from his canteen, the simple act of kindness stood in stark contrast to the brutality beyond their shelter. It was a reminder of their humanity, a thread of hope in the darkness.
The scene was a stark juxtaposition of fear and resolve, a testament to the unyielding spirit of the men in the bunker. Sergeant Miller was a seasoned veteran. His face was etched with lines of worry and experience. He'd seen more battles than he cared to remember. Yet here he was, leading another group of young men into the fray. His blue eyes held a steely determination. He would see these boys through or die trying.
Barely out of his teens, his boyish face seemed out of place in this hellish landscape. But there was a quiet strength about him. He moved with purpose, always ready to lend a hand. His easy smile brought comfort to those around him. Even now, as he tended to the wounded, that smile didn't falter.
Jenkins was the nervous one. His hands shook as he checked his rifle for the 100th time. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool night air. This was his first real combat situation. The training hadn't prepared him for this. The fear threatened to overwhelm him, but he fought it back. He wouldn't let his comrades down.
The wounded soldier remained nameless. His face was pale, contorted in pain, but his eyes held a fierce light. He refused to give up, clinging to life with every labored breath. In his struggle, the others found inspiration. If he could fight, so could they. His silent battle became a rallying point for the men in the bunker.
Fear crept through the bunker like a living thing. It whispered doubts into each man's ear. What if they didn't make it? What if this was their last night on Earth?
His hands trembled as he gripped his rifle. Each explosion made him flinch. He longed for the safety of home, for his mother's comforting embrace.
But alongside the fear, determination burned bright. Sergeant Miller's jaw was set in a hard line. He'd been here before. He knew the cost of war, but also the price of failure. His resolve was unshakable. He would see his men through this night, no matter what it took. His steady presence anchored the others, giving them strength.
He felt the fear too, but he pushed it aside. There was work to be done. The wounded needed tending. His comrades needed support. He focused on these tasks, letting them fill his mind. In helping others, he found purpose. It was a shield against the terror that threatened to consume them all. His quiet courage was contagious.
Even the wounded soldier fought his own battle against fear. Each breath was a struggle, each moment a victory. He could have given up, surrendered to the pain, but something drove him on. Perhaps it was the thought of home, or the brotherhood he felt with these men. Whatever the reason, his determination was a beacon in the darkness. The night wore on, tense and uneasy. Suddenly, a cry pierced the air. A soldier lay wounded in no man's land. Without hesitation, Private James sprang into action. He grabbed his medic bag and headed for the bunker entrance.
Sergeant Miller tried to stop him. It was too dangerous, but James was already gone, disappearing into the smoke-filled night.
The others watched in stunned silence. The sounds of gunfire intensified. Flares lit up the sky, casting eerie shadows. Every instinct screamed at James to turn back. But he pressed on. He could hear the wounded man's cries growing louder. He was close now. Bullets whizzed past his head. He dropped to his stomach, crawling the last few yards. Finally, he reached the fallen soldier. It was someone from another unit. The man's leg was badly injured. James worked quickly, applying a tourniquet. He spoke softly, reassuring the frightened soldier. The chaos of battle faded away. In that moment, there was only the two of them. Two men clinging to humanity in a world gone mad. With the wounded man stabilized, James began the perilous journey back. He half carried, half dragged the soldier. Every step was agony. The weight was almost too much to bear, but James refused to give up. He thought of the man's family, waiting for news. He thought of his own loved ones. With a final burst of strength, he made it back to the bunker. As they tumbled inside, cheers erupted. In that moment, James knew he'd done more than save a life. He'd given hope to them all.
In the corner of the bunker, the wounded soldier fought his own battle. Every breath was a struggle. Sweat soaked his brow. The pain was constant, a fiery agony that threatened to consume him. But still, he held on. There was something in his eyes, a fierce determination that defied his broken body. He wouldn't give up. Not here, not now.
Private James knelt beside him, changing his bandages. The wounds were bad. Under normal circumstances, the soldier wouldn't have stood a chance. But these weren't normal circumstances. This was war. And in war, men often surpassed what should be possible. James worked tirelessly, doing everything he could to keep the soldier alive. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, but his eyes held a deep concern.
The other men in the bunker found themselves drawn to the wounded soldier's struggle. In his fight, they saw their own. Each labored breath he took was a victory against death. Each moment he clung to life was a defiance of the war that raged around them. Without realizing it, they began to rally around him. His battle became theirs. His strength became their strength.
Sergeant Miller watched all this with a mix of pride and sorrow. He'd seen too many good men fall, but he'd also seen the incredible resilience of the human spirit. This wounded soldier, whose name they didn't even know, had become a symbol, a reminder of why they fought, why they endured. In his struggle, Miller saw the struggle of all soldiers. And in the way his men rallied around him, Miller saw hope. Hope that even in the darkest times, humanity could shine through.
Beyond the relative safety of the bunker, chaos reigned. The night sky was alive with fire. Tracer rounds cut through the darkness like angry fireflies. The earth shook with each explosion. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder. It was a scene from hell itself, a landscape transformed by the fury of war. The men in the bunker could only imagine the carnage outside. Each boom, each rattling of the walls, told a story of destruction. They thought of their comrades out there, fighting and dying. The guilt of being safe while others fought was almost unbearable. But they knew their turn would come. Soon, they too would step into that maelstrom.
Private Jenkins couldn't stop shaking. The sounds of battle were overwhelming. Each explosion made him jump. He tried to focus on his breathing, tried to find some calm center. But the chaos outside kept intruding. He looked at his fellow soldiers, seeking reassurance.
Sergeant Miller caught his eye and nodded. That simple gesture meant more than words ever could. It said, "We're in this together, we'll make it through."
Amidst the chaos, there were moments of eerie quiet. Brief lulls in the fighting that were almost more terrifying than the noise. In these moments, the men held their breath. Was it over? Or was this just the calm before an even greater storm? The uncertainty was maddening, but they steeled themselves, ready for whatever came next. In the face of chaos, they found a strange kind of peace, a resolve that could weather any storm. In the crucible of war, bonds are forged that last a lifetime. The men in the bunker were no longer just soldiers. They were brothers, thrown together by circumstance, united by a common goal: survival. Each man knew that his life might depend on the others. This knowledge created a trust deeper than any they had known before.
Private James and Jenkins, so different in temperament, found themselves drawn together. James's quiet strength helped calm Jenkins's nerves. In turn, Jenkins's raw honesty reminded James of the home they were fighting for. They shared stories of their families, their hopes for the future. In those quiet conversations, they found moments of normalcy amidst the madness of war.
Sergeant Miller watched over them all like a father. He'd seen too many young men fall. Each loss was a wound on his soul. But these boys, they gave him hope. Their courage, their resilience, it amazed him. He saw in them the best of humanity. In protecting them, in leading them, he found purpose. They were more than just soldiers under his command. They were his responsibility, his family.
Even the wounded soldier in his silent struggle was part of this bond. The others rallied around him, taking turns to sit with him, to offer what comfort they could. His fight became their fight. In helping him, they helped themselves. It gave them a focus, a way to push back against the helplessness of their situation. This shared purpose strengthened the ties between them. In the darkest of times, they found light in each other. Amidst the chaos of war, moments of serenity emerged like flowers in a battlefield. These brief respites were precious beyond measure. In the bunker, the men found ways to create these moments. They became masters of finding peace in the eye of the storm. These interludes of calm helped them maintain their sanity in a world gone mad.
I had a battered harmonica. In the quieter moments, I would play soft melodies. The music filled the bunker, transporting us away from the horrors outside. For a few minutes, we could close our eyes and imagine we were somewhere else. Home, perhaps, or in a peaceful field far from the front lines. The simple tunes became a lifeline, a reminder of the world we were fighting to protect.
I had a ritual of cleaning my rifle. The repetitive motions were almost meditative. As I worked, I would softly recite poems I had memorized in school. The familiar words were comforting, a link to a more civilized world. The other men would listen, letting the cadence of my voice wash over them. In those moments, the war seemed far away.
Even Private Jenkins, for all his nervousness, found his own form of serenity. He had a small notebook where he wrote letters to his family. He might never be able to send them, but the act of writing itself was soothing. Putting his thoughts and fears on paper helped him process them. It was his way of maintaining a connection to his old life, of reminding himself why he was here. As the hours crept by, the night seemed endless. Each minute stretched into an eternity. The men in the bunker fought against exhaustion. They knew that to sleep was to risk death. But staying alert was a constant battle. Their eyes burned, their bodies ached. Yet still, they forced themselves to remain vigilant.
I found myself nodding off. My head would drop, then jerk up suddenly. Each time a jolt of fear would course through me. What if I had slept through an attack? What if my moment of weakness had cost lives? The guilt and fear warred within me, keeping me in a state of anxious wakefulness.
Sergeant Miller paced the bunker, checking on each of his men. He offered words of encouragement, a pat on the shoulder, anything to keep their spirits up. But even he felt the weight of the long night. The responsibility for these young lives pressed down on him. He couldn't show weakness, couldn't let them see how tired he was. He had to be their rock, their anchor in this storm.
I focused on the wounded soldier. Tending to him gave me a purpose, a reason to stay alert. I monitored the man's breathing, changed his bandages, offered him water. In caring for another, I found the strength to push through my own exhaustion. The night might be long, but as long as the wounded soldier fought, so would I.
The first hint of dawn came as a surprise. A faint lightening of the sky, barely noticeable at first. The men in the bunker held their breath. Could it be true? Had they made it through the night? The sounds of battle had died down, replaced by an eerie silence. It was the silence that was most unnerving. After hours of chaos, the quiet felt wrong.
I was the first to move. I cautiously approached the bunker entrance. The others watched, hearts pounding. Would a sniper's bullet end our hope just as it began? But nothing happened. I peered out, then turned back to my men. The look on my face said it all. We had survived. The night was over.
The relief that washed over the bunker was palpable. Men who had been stoic through the night's horrors now found tears in their eyes. They hugged each other, laughed, cried. The emotion was overwhelming. They had faced death and emerged on the other side. They were changed, bonded by an experience few could understand.
Even the wounded soldier seemed to rally with the coming of dawn. His breathing eased, some color returned to his cheeks. It was as if the new day had brought new strength. I felt a surge of hope. Perhaps we would all make it home after all. The dawn brought more than just light. It brought the promise of survival, of a future beyond the war.
As the men emerged from the bunker into the soft light of dawn, they carried with them more than just their weapons and gear. They carried the weight of the night's experiences, the bonds forged in the crucible of war, and a newfound understanding of true courage. It wasn't about fearlessness, it was about facing that fear and pushing through it.
I had been so nervous at the start of the night, but now I stood taller. I had confronted my deepest fears and survived. The shaking in my hands had stopped. In its place was a quiet confidence. I knew now that I could face whatever came next. My courage had been tested and proven.
Sergeant Miller looked at his men with pride. He had seen them at their most vulnerable, had watched them struggle and persevere. In their courage, he found renewed purpose. These young men, thrown into the horrors of war, had shown a strength that would carry them through whatever lay ahead.